Now entering Nerdist.com.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, Episode 49. Return to Tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. In this receptacle, I am the thought energy of John Champion.
And in this receptacle, I am the thought energy of Ken Ray. Each week, we join our consciousness with an episode of Star Trek to see if we can determine the morals, messages, and meanings, and then we'll figure out if they stand the test of time, just like our robot bodies will in the future.
Ken, for some reason I picture you've already got a robot body in the works in the garage.
Grow the nanobots, dude. I am absolutely. No, I got plans. Don't misunderstand. I'm sure I've got drawings. Right. I mean, and sure I am saving up for a 3D printer. But no, it's not like I've got a robot body waiting. Otherwise, it wouldn't be waiting.
You'd already be there. I picture the plans of the robot body. It's like, here's a drawing of Ken, and then you have on the other end of the wall, you have the drawing of the robot body with the, gears, levers, eyeballs, all that stuff. And then in the middle, you've seen that Far Side cartoon, and then a miracle happens.
Well, it's not the Far Side, but yeah, that is what you're talking about. I will say,
was
though,
it the Far Side?
No, I can't. It's just sort of it's one of those. It's not the Far Side. I do know that, but I also know what you're talking about. Gears and levers, though, those are completely inefficient, dude. I'm building mine out of jelly, just like the good people in Return to Tomorrow.
And that is the episode that we're talking about, in which the disembodied consciousnesses of three aliens decide to spend a little time inside our Enterprise crew as they're building those robot bodies out of jelly and gears. Well, they don't have gears, but they have jelly and circuit boards.
They do have jelly and circuit boards. And I will say, you say they're spending time there. It's always good to have guests.
It is. You just don't want them to stay too long. It's like the in-laws,
Exactly.
All right. So one thing that I would like to do before we get going on this fascinating story, Ken, is I'd like to drop a little trivia on you. Are you okay with that?
I've been waiting all week. Please hit me.
All right, cool. So one thing that I do have to mention is that in our continuing series of Roddenberry Discovered Documents, we have a story draft by John T. Dugan. And this one in particular is very interesting to me because he actually begins the draft with a discussion of these points that he wishes to explore. And honestly, he lays out exactly what we do on Mission Log. He poses the questions about what happens when man has evolved so highly that he has conquered the material world, and kind of makes a case for trying to develop morally and ethically as well as technologically. And he basically spells it out that Sargon's people do not fare that well. They are not able to evolve morally and ethically without destroying themselves in the process because of their technology. But he makes a case for there being hope for mankind. So all of that is very interesting to read. So please do check that out, in addition to the story points that are a bit different. He mentions one thing in that introduction that grated me just a tiny, tiny bit. Have you ever heard this kind of rumor, this bit of conventional wisdom that we only use a tiny portion of our brains? I've heard anywhere from 3 to 7%. Scientifically, it's not true, but he does make that assertion in his introduction.
Have you seen Defending Your Life?
Yeah, I love that. Albert Brooks.
Yeah,
terrific.
Albert, it's fantastic. But the people who are sort of running the trial system and the sort of between life place,
right?
They use like 47, 48%. Do you know how much you use? 45, 3.
Yeah, right.
3.
Right.
I use 3% of my brain. Yeah. It's what I thought of, actually. It's fun. Anyway, that's not trivia for this. That's trivia for the Defending Your Life podcast that John and I will be starting in 15 years. In the meantime.
Coming soon. You'll be very glad to know, Ken, that in this introduction, this was kind of a duplicate Earth again. And thank goodness we do not go down that path in the final episode at all, because we saw how well that worked out in Miri. And the ending is quite a bit different. You know, the moral / message, I would say, is a bit more heavy-handed. I think what we end up with in this story is a little bit different. And I would say that the whole kind of the whole interaction plays out very differently. There are a lot of similar plot points, including like the character traits and kind of the soul swapping. That all kind of stays the same, but there are a lot of the plot points that play out quite a bit differently. And because of those differences, Dugan was not happy with the changes that were made to his original script, so he uses a nom de plume. We have to say a big welcome to Diana Muldaur, who we will see again in Star Trek later, but as different characters. So that is an important distinction as we're talking about the guest stars who show up.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Did you just have a moment, Ken?
I had a weird moment with Diana Muldaur in this. Okay, so it's 1980. Was it the first season that Gates McFadden left Next Gen? Like at the end of the first season?
At the end, yeah.
So I'm a 17-year-old, 18-year-old boy, right? When the first season of Next Generation is on. And Gates McFadden, I had a thing for her. There, I'll just say it out loud. That's fine. I had a thing for her. Right. And she was replaced by Diana Muldaur, for whom I did not have a thing. I now have a thing for Diana Muldaur. the minus 12-year-old version of me, or, you know, whatever. It was really, really, really good to see her in this episode. And there's the sexism for this episode. Okay, there's no sexism in this episode of Star Trek that I could find, so I was sure to bring some to Mission Log.
I have to agree with you, Matt. She's fabulous.
I actually don't think it's sexist, by the way, to say that someone is attractive. She was very attractive in this episode, and it was kind of it was neat to see. I'm actually used to her as sort of the crusty Dr. Pulaski. You know, mean, she's woman bones basically in Next Gen, at least in some respects. And so to see her play a very different kind of character and a much younger character too was interesting, and also interesting.
Right. Hey, the voice of Sargon. Any guess who did that?
No clue.
How about Scotty himself, James Doohan?
Really?
Yeah, for real, for real. He sounds like not only one of the game thralls or the game masters from Triskelion, but kind of like the Guardian of Forever. But no, that is James Doohan doing the voice of Sargon.
See, I actually wondered, it didn't even occur to me to check, but I wondered if it was Shatner doing it. Because when it goes from, you know, the disembodied voice to the Shatner voice, they put so much processing on it that you're like, you know, that could have been him doing a voice. But it was actually James Doohan not doing a voice. Well,
maybe it's James Doohan doing a Shatner voice.
You know, if Shatner didn't pause quite as much,
right,
when he's talking. Yeah.
Speaking of Scotty, there's a scene where he walks into the lab where Thalassa is working on the robot, and I believe that he is actually holding the prop that was, you ready for it? Norman's robot guts. I swear, that little piece that he's holding is Norman's robot guts. I guarantee you. And finally, Billy Blackburn is somebody we have not mentioned yet on our podcast, though he's worth mentioning because, A, he shows up as a featured extra very often in Star Trek, and if you own the Blu-ray sets of Star Trek, then you will see many of his home movies that he shot on the set. And this, I think, is just a very interesting place to point him out, that he is inside that latex robot suit.
Creepiest character in this episode.
Compressing 500,000 years of history into 10 minutes or less. Return with us now to the thrilling story of Return to Tomorrow.
Prologue. The Enterprise is being drawn somewhere by someone or something. They're further out in space than any human ship has ever been before. They're following a distress signal, though from whom and for what, no one, not even Spock, can say. What they come across is a planet, a bit like Earth, except much older and completely dead, its atmosphere having been ripped away about 500,000 years ago. So what the heck? A big, echoing, booming voice assures Captain Kirk by name that all will be answered in time. He is Sargon, and he is dead. And he'd really like to talk to Kirk. And if that scares Kirk, then all of mankind will die. Act 1. Strange new life and new civilizations is what the Enterprise does, so Kirk decides to stay and investigate. Spock says he's found both energy and a chamber on sensors 100 miles below the planet's surface. Shouldn't be possible to beam to it, though Sargon says he can make that work. Kirk decides to take McCoy down to check stuff out, though a flick of the power on the Enterprise, all of it, lets Kirk know that Sargon would really like it if Spock came too. So, it's Kirk, Spock, McCoy, 2 red shirts, and, well, hello. And you are? She is Dr. Ann Mulhall, astrobiology. She was sort of ordered to the landing party, probably by Sargon. Sargon uses the Enterprise to beam the landing party down, minus the red shirts. 100 miles below the surface, Spock is impressed by the chamber. It's about 500,000 years old, likely built around the time whatever destroyed the surface. A door opens at one end of the chamber, revealing a light-up globe. This is Sargon. Well, kind of. This is a receptacle holding the life force and energy of Sargon. He used to have a body, but now, not so much. He's also got this weird habit of referring to the Enterprise crew as my children. Well, his children, but when he says it, it's my children. He thinks it's possible that they are the result of his races colonizing the galaxy 6,000 centuries ago. Dr. Mulhall doesn't think that that's the case for humans, though Spock says that would explain a lot about Vulcans. So what happened to Sargon and his people? Well, they sort of failed the crisis that all civilizations that survive long enough reach. Their brains got too big. They thought themselves gods. Doesn't explain what happened exactly, but it is fairly ominous. So what can Kirk and company do for Sargon? He'd like to borrow their bodies, something he explains by inhabiting Kirk's body and putting Kirk's dim, little energy into the globe receptacle. Wow, feels good to be in a body for Sargon. It's been 500,000 years after all. Also, Kirk's body is excellent. Don't worry, he'll give it back. Yeah, maybe he could do that soon, though. Mulhall and McCoy say his heart's going too fast and his temperature's going too high for the Kirk body. At this rate, he will kill Kirk. Well, that might make this next part awkward. See, there are 2 more just like me in the other room. I'd like one to borrow Mulhall's body and one to borrow Spock's. We need them so that we may live again. Act 2. Meet the glowing globe receptacles of Henoch and Thalassa. Thalassa is Sargon's wife. While many of the best minds were chosen to survive, only 3 have made it for these 500,000 years, including Henoch, who was on the opposite side of whatever battle destroyed their planet from Sargon and Thalassa. If it's cool, they would like to borrow the bodies of Kirk, Spock, and Mulhall for a bit, just long enough to build humanoid robots to inhabit. And now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get out of Kirk's body. Kirk is conscious of everything that happened while he was away, and he is all for it. Mulhall and McCoy are not so sure, so Sargon says, hey, no rush. Go back to your ship, talk it over. Everybody's got to be cool with this or it's not cool. Back aboard the Enterprise, they talk it over. Kirk is still all for it. Scotty thinks it sounds crazy. McCoy thinks it sounds indecent. And Spock and Mulhall are turned on by the scientific possibilities. Kirk makes an impassioned plea to McCoy. Yes, this is dangerous, but where there are no risks, there are no rewards. And the rewards here could be awesome. And risk is our business. It's what we do. Bones may not be excited, but he'll go along. 3 receptacles to beam up, and in no time the bodies of Kirk, Mulhall, and Spock are inhabited by Sargon, Thalassa, and Henoch. Henoch is totally turned on by being alive and by Nurse Chapel, and he tells her so. Thalassa is also stoked to breathe again, to feel again. And by the way, husband, way to choose a smoking hot bod for yourself. Hey, back at you, sweets. Now let's make out. In other people's bodies. Henoch is impressed with Spock's body. It is way better than the human bodies. He tells McCoy that it's weird that the Vulcans never conquered the humans. McCoy explains that the Vulcans worship peace above all else. Oh, yeah, says Henoch, just like we do. The new inhabitants are too much for the bodies of Kirk and Mulhall. Spock's body can take it, though. Henoch says he'll make a concoction that'll make the other bodies work for Sargon and Thalassa. He takes Nurse Chapel to help him, though he doesn't do exactly what he says he'll do. Henoch sabotages the formula meant to keep Kirk's body going. He wants to keep Spock's body for himself, but to make that happen, the Kirk-Sargon combo will have to die. Chapel picks up on the ruse, though Henoch erases that part of Chapel's memory. Act 3. Bones is worried, but all seems to be going okay. The construction of android robots is underway. Sargon and Thalassa are getting touchy-feely during their work, though Henoch points out that all the feeling parts will be gone once they're in their robot bodies. Sargon says, sure, but our big brains will still work, and we can help people. Yeah, says Henoch. That'll be great. Sargon goes woozy, though he says he'll be fine after the next injection. Chapel's preparing those, and there's something about that, wow, weird. I had something to say, but, yeah, I guess everything's great. Thalassa continues work on her robot body, giving Scotty, the engineer, a glimpse at their advanced abilities. A chiding Henoch shoos Scotty out of the lab, though, and now he starts to work on Thalassa. Robot bodies are going to suck, and you know it. We should totally keep these bodies. We could help people that way. Thalassa's against the idea, though she's also starting to hate the idea of the robot bodies. On another deck, Sargon calls to McCoy. He's not doing so well. He's checking Henoch's formula, but everything looks okay. Now Thalassa starts trying to talk Sargon into keeping the bodies that they're in right now. He answers her by dropping dead. Act 4. McCoy is able to stabilize Kirk's body, but Sargon is gone, and Kirk's stuck in his receptacle. Henoch continues working on Thalassa's robot body, though when it's done, she says she can't live in that thing. She goes to McCoy, promising a way to save Kirk. There's just one condition. She'd like to keep Mulhall's body. Cool? Come on, you barely even knew Mulhall. Just keep it quiet. Look, we could take your ship and anybody we want. You're a tiny little brain. You ought to be worshipping me. I can make you writhe in pain with my thoughts, like I'm doing right now. Okay, my bad. Got a little carried away there. You know, Sargon was right. I really can't be trusted with a living body. The temptations are just too great. That's what I wanted to hear, says Sargon. Turns out he wasn't dead. He had transferred his consciousness to the Enterprise. Now he's got a plan, one that involves Nurse Chapel, and not Dr. McCoy. Don't let the door slide India on the way out. 2 shakes of the ship, and McCoy is free to head back to sickbay, where he finds Kirk and Kirk's body, Mulhall and Mulhall's body, and all 3 receptacles burned and broken, and Spock's consciousness gone. Ah, well, nothing to be done, according to Kirk. Make a potion that'll kill Spock's body too, please. Kirk and Mulhall head to the bridge, where Henoch is taken over. The problem is Henoch is still super smart and super powerful. He stops everybody who tries to stop him. Everybody, that is, except Nurse Chapel. She manages to inject Henoch with the poison, killing him and Spock's body. Kirk mourns the loss of his friend, but come on, this is Spock we're talking about. Sargon couldn't let that happen. He shoved Spock's consciousness into Nurse Chapel for a bit. Now Spock's back in Spock's body, and Sargon and Thalassa have to pass into eternity, after they borrowed the bodies of Kirk and Mulhall for one last kiss. Now into oblivion, together, forever, and never to part. The end.
That was beautiful.
You like the Rickroll at the end?
That was excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, there are a lot of little observations that I had about this one. By the way, were they mourning Spock a bit more in this than they were in the Immunity Syndrome? It's hard to tell because whenever you mourn Spock, it just goes by really fast.
Yeah, I mean, a bit more, but not much more. I mean,
okay.
You know, definitely Kirk was more into the fact that Spock was dead and sad about it.
Yeah.
But I think screen time, we maybe got 4 extra seconds of, Spock.
Man, I hope one day that guy gets a proper funeral. I really do. You know?
We might spend years mourning Spock before we know, whether or not he's going to make it or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, did you notice that Kirk mentions the Apollo program again before we actually got one off the ground? This was actually after the launch pad disaster, the Apollo 1 mission that killed Gus Grissom. But it was before we had actually launched one, and certainly still years before we got to the moon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, when you say years before, it was about 1.5 years before.
Yeah.
I mean, which is still, but the Apollo mission was it was a thing.
Well, it was a thing, but but by the time this episode aired,
right,
we had lost the 3 astronauts on the launch pad, and then nothing for a long, long time because that was a huge disaster.
Okay,
but
I mean, yeah, it's a little. I guess maybe you could say it's a tiny bit of tempting fate. Although what I would say is it's actually, I mean, they're sitting there saying, in 300 years we're going to, have interstellar travel, and we're going to have transporters, and you're not going to have to cut into people to actually cut into people if you're going to perform surgery or something like that. So, I mean, to go out on a limb and say, in the next 1.5 to 2 years, we're going to do this thing that we're already planning to do, that's literally on the launch pad. I mean, yeah, it is neat. It would be very much I guess putting yourself back in 1968, it would very much be wow, neat. That thing that's supposed to happen next year is actually part of the history of this show. Yeah, that is kind of cool. Now that you mention
well, it was still, like I said, it was in flux. It was a terrible tragedy that they were lost, and it was a huge risk. And when I say the word risk, I think we know where we're going on this.
We take risks.
Our business.
Risk is our business. It's what we do.
I hope, Ken, that you did exactly that I did. And whenever you watch this episode, you stop, you stand up, and you give it a slow clap. You start the slow clap. Because I'm compelled to do that whenever that moment happens.
I absolutely did not do that.
You should try it next time.
All right, well, I'll see what I can do.
Enjoyment. Yeah. We touched again on the idea here of aliens maybe being a part of Earth's development. It's not the thrust of the story, but there's this distant possible relationship. They don't explore it too much, but Sargon keeps calling Kirk his son.
You know what I wondered about was like had we gone ahead and gotten the robot bodies, Henoch and Sargon and Thalassa, might we have ended up with sort of a Prometheus thing where they see what happened? Like maybe they go back into the historical archives and they're watching reruns of I don't know, like the Real Housewives of Orange County or something, and then they like have a Prometheus moment, like no, this has gone terribly, terribly wrong. Let's get me some black goo in here. Because we gotta fix what we broke. I gotta ask a question. And I'm kind of surprised actually that we're not putting this in topics, but since you say it's not a major thrust of the story, I guess we'll go ahead and do it outside of that. Did the alien forefather thing bother you as much here as it did in Who Mourns for Adonai? Because I remember you were like intensely offended by the idea that we didn't do this ourselves in Who Mourns for Adonai.
I was a little more disappointed because I don't really jive with that whole thing. I think it's I don't know. I think when you treat that kind of thing seriously and outside the realm of fiction, then I definitely have a big problem with it. I think in this, I didn't hate it nearly as much as Who Mourns for Adonai for two reasons. I mean, one is that we kind of introduced the idea. We introduced it very vaguely. Sargon just says, 600,000 years ago, we had ships all over the place. We kind of lost track of what happened to that. We may or may not be related, but that's not what's important. We have some similarities. We may or may not be related. And then Mulhall steps right in, and she kind of says, no. We pretty much know that, we've got the emergence of this strain of primates about 600,000 years ago. And you could finish that sentence by saying, and Homo sapiens don't appear for about another 400,000 years after that. So they kind of introduced it, but they kind of dropped it. It was less important in this, so I didn't really have a big problem with that.
I'm going to hit you with a couple of other things really quickly as far as this goes.
Sure.
I guess, first of all, it is a bit more Prometheus than it was Who Mourns for Adonai. Because in Prometheus, we actually see them basically, plant the seeds of life on Earth. Whereas in Who Mourns for Adonai, we know that guy, Apollo, that they're talking to, had appeared to extant humans at some point in the past. I mean, people were able to worship. Right. Yeah. People were able to worship Apollo as a god because they had seen Apollo do godlike things. What about 2001? Does it bother you in 2001 that we got ape group A and ape group B, and it was interference by some sort of alien, something that actually moved one of those versions along and the other one sort of died out?
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess, boy, here's a whole other podcast for us. Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on how literally you take what happens in 2001, you know. It's kind of funny that in the early drafts of that, they literally had the monolith as like a TV that would, that would teach these apes, basically bring them education to be better than what they are.
But I hope it wasn't showing the Real Housewives of Orange County.
No, indeed, no. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's two very different things if you go down that path of, well, we're here, we evolved, but then we used outside influence for our education and our betterment. Because at that point, well, anything is an outside influence. Just matters how far you look, as opposed to actually being seeded here by some genetic material or biological material, which is a whole other interesting topic in and of itself. You know, if the very idea that there may be bacteria or chemistry that exists on a meteor that has been hitting planets all over the galaxy for hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions of years, might have some influence on what life arose there. I think the problem is, for me, when you get into this idea of fully formed human beings just sort of plopping down on Earth, and that's what became the human beings that we have today. You know, I think that's where I have a bigger problem with it.
All right.
Yeah. But hey, I got to point out before we move on, Spock and Chapel shared a little consciousness, and I think Chapel was pretty excited about that.
Yeah. Now you make me soup.
I kind of envy Sargon, Thalassa, and Henoch. After 500,000 years, life is still a ball.
Should we chalk this one up to carbon chauvinism? Because here it's the bad guy who wants the human body, and he goes around tempting the others with the human body. You know, the more benevolent one here, Sargon, is much more accepting of his state. He sort of understands their past transgressions. He understands where they are, and he's trying to live as best as he can without upsetting the state of things around him. You know, the entire time, he's very transparent to everybody. Mm-hmm. And so he's a very interesting alien so far that we've encountered, super advanced, and yet totally open and kind, instead of just saying like, well, too bad, puny humans, we'll see you later. You know?
He is a very different kind of alien than we've come across, although it is interesting when they say, oh, every civilization that lasts this long reaches this, crisis moment. And mm-hmm. for some it's worked out, and for some it hasn't. Going back through it, like the Metrons, they seem to be fine. The Talosians, not so fine, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm assuming that that's still the same kind of crisis, right? Where we evolve to a point where we can take our super brain and do something really amazing, or we can screw it up, which is both, encouraging that we're going to eventually get to super brain maybe, but also sort of mm-hmm. discouraging that, like, wow, so even when we get that good, there's still plenty of time for us to screw this whole thing up.
Well, yeah, I mean, their ultimate sin is what? Pride? I don't know. They evolve. The crisis, I think, is academic at that point. There's talk of nuclear weapons in this episode, but clearly Sargon and his race have evolved even far beyond that.
Right.
They made it through the whole thing that Taste of Armageddon. That's puny. They probably made it through their whole period of computer warfare. But he says that then they thought of themselves as gods. And that's when everything started to fall apart.
Okay, but is that the crisis, though, or is the crisis just what do you do when you gain almost ultimate power? Okay, so their particular failing was, okay, well, so we thought we were gods, and then we tried to do too much, and that apparently led to the destruction of our civilization. The Gamesters of Triskelion actually made it to that same crisis point. And what did they do? Mm-hmm. They started playing games with other people's lives. That's what they did. What did the Talosians do? They're kind of a different race, actually, because they were, as far as we know, just sort of groovy humans who then had some cataclysm on the planet's surface. So they went underground, and that's when they started working on their, brain abilities. But then once they had that crisis, well, obviously what we need are slaves. So let's get us some of those. No, not to fight, play games for us, but to actually build things and take us back to the surface.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, is the crisis just what happens when you get too much power? And then there are, again, like a million ways to blow it. And then, there are also ways to not. I mean, you've got, Blaylock. Baylock from I
am Baylock
from the Corbomite maneuver, right? He seems, his only thing is he's kind of afraid of what people are going to think of, what he looks like. But he's ultra. Well, yeah, right. He looks like a kid. Yeah. He's like Ron Howard's brother, for crying out loud. Right, he's ultra powerful, but he's also, he seems to be going along fine in the universe. There's Trelane's parents. They're trying to raise this hyper brain kid, and that's not necessarily going so well. But otherwise, they got it going on. There are, as we mentioned before, the Metrons. There's who was it in with the Klingon? Come on.
Oh, the Arcanians.
Thank you. Yeah, they seem to actually be doing okay too. So I don't know that we actually know what the crisis is, unless the crisis is. It doesn't feel like Pride was the thing. It feels like Pride was the thing this time. It feels more like the crisis is. It's almost like the crisis is living too long. If that makes any sense, or surviving too long.
Sure.
Now I got a question.
Okay.
They seem, as far as I'm concerned, and this will surprise you. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, they seem to have a pretty good plan. Let's build robot bodies, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Can we back up for a second?
I'm with you.
The very first thing that I'm going to work on, if I'm working on my robot body, and as we've discussed, I've got the plans. Very first thing I'm going to work on is making sure that I can feel what I want to feel before I inhabit that robot body. And that's not to say I'm just going to be able to flip a switch and turn on happiness. But you know who says you can do that now? Tony Robbins and Deepak Chopra. There are people who think that you can go ahead and do that today. So the idea though, if you're building a robot brain, you can build functionality into it that will react with, sort of happiness. I'm going to tell a story, and it's going to seem like it's not going to make any sense, but I remember it still almost 20 years later. The saddest thing that I ever saw was a kid learning to laugh at something that was not funny. I know. His kid. It really was horrible, and it's burned into my head. And this kid has got to be like in his early 20s now, and he's probably still doing this. He's probably watching reruns of the Brady Bunch and thinking it's the most hysterical thing ever.
And that little boy's name was Commander Data.
No, here's the thing. So this kid's getting out of a car, right? And his friend, a 6-year-old, riding in the back of the car as well. Mom's driving in the front seat, whatever. Kid in the back of the car says something. And it was obviously meant to be a joke to make the other kid laugh. And the other kid didn't laugh. And the kid in the back of the car says, I said, and then repeats a stupid joke louder. And the kid going into the house turns around and goes, ha ha. And that's it. That is, at that point, that kid started down the road to ruin as far as I'm concerned. Now, here's the thing. We learn to enjoy things that are not inherently enjoyable throughout our lives. There is nothing inherently better about Steely Dan than there is about the Chemical Brothers. But somewhere along the way, you might choose to like Steely Dan and I choose to like the Chemical Brothers, or vice versa. Or we might learn to hate both of those in favor of the Dixie Chicks or Toby Keith. Or we might hate all of those in favor of Mozart or Beethoven. We are constantly learning what to like and what not to like. And there are a million things that go into that. And just having a robot brain does not mean that you're not going to feel. I'm not a carbon chauvinist. I think we have discussed this a time or two. Silicon forever. Get your T-shirt. Tell your friends.
They've had 500,000 years to work on it.
Well, that was the other thing that was kind of weird. So they're ultra powerful. Yeah. They can control the ship. They can talk to the ship from far, far, far away. But they're apparently not talking between terrariums.
Right.
That was an odd sort of. It's a minor thing, because had they been able to do that, then obviously there's no story, because they haven't been able to work out with Henoch over the 500,000 years.
Well, you could make a case for it that they have no machinery or whatever it is that they need to do. All they have is their little consciousness terrarium to play with, and that's it. But it does seem like if they're that far evolved, you could almost do a Talosian thing and use that sort of power of illusion to then distract yourself to do other things. But whatever, that's a whole speculative argument way down the road.
Yeah.
But I have to ask you, Ken, has the crew of the Enterprise evolved a bit here? I pose that to you, that they may have evolved. Now, our listeners who know, I would say at this point, almost our sick fetish for Dr. Roger Corby are probably not surprised to hear his name invoked in this episode. But we have to compare these stories. So when we met Dr. Corby, we were ready to get rid of that guy in no time, and his plan in no time. But here, Kirk's scientific curiosity is aroused. And Kirk is the one in that great speech who is tempting his crew the way that either Corby or even Harry Mudd did. He's telling Scotty, look, warp engine the size of a walnut. And he goes around the table, and McCoy is incensed, and you cut back to Scotty, and he's like, no, seriously, walnut? Because we should talk. You know?
Yeah, I don't know how evolved they are here. Honestly, I think it really has to do with permission versus theft. I mean, it's the fact that Sargon is being upfront with them. The fact that Sargon is saying, I want to borrow your body. I mean, and he even goes about, I don't know, you could almost say it's sort of like what Kirk said. I guess it was to the Organians, where, the Organians are like, you could take whatever you want from us. No, that wasn't the Organians. I can't remember who it was. But when they're trying to get dilithium crystals from some alien, the alien's like, no, you can't have it because you might use it for war someday. And then the alien says, well, you could take this. And Kirk's like, yeah, we could, but we're not gonna.
We're talking about Mirror, Mirror. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Mirror, Mirror. You get the same thing. You kind of get the same thing here from Sargon. He shows them, look, I could take your body. And you actually have Thalassa say it later. Yeah, I could take your body. I could take your ship. I could take everything. All right. I want permission. I think that's probably why Kirk and crew are so cool with it. Now, what I do think is kind of funny is we're assuming that they don't have a policy of non-interference as well.
Yeah, big time.
And we're okay with that. No, people from this other planet. I can't give you a gun that's not flintlock because that leaps like 400 years ahead of where you are. Oh, you have technology that'll leap us 10,000 years? Yeah, we'll take some of that, please. I mean, why is it?
Can we talk about that walnut engine again?
Exactly. Even Spock is like, wow, we could kick some major butt if we had this. Not in a military way, more like we could just skip the next 10,000 years of, trying to learn this and figure it out ourselves. No, it would be great. Just hand me all of it.
Right.
So
you're exactly right.
Why is the Prime Directive cool then? Why is the policy of non-interference cool for everybody but us?
Yeah. Well, we do say that a pre-industrial and specifically a pre-warp society are off limits when it comes to the Prime Directive, except for every opportunity that Kirk says, no, we will violate the Prime Directive. So maybe Kirk and Sargon are on the same page here.
Yeah.
They're like, well, we have these rules, but we like to think of them more as helpful suggestions.
Yeah. Come on, gimme. I'm your son. Remember how I've been your children?
Right.
Give to me.
Well, and here's the big thing. Sargon and Corby are different in, let's say that Sargon is less eugenicsy than Corby. Sargon is less interested in taking over the world, but I think there is that relation on some level, something that Sargon sees in humans from Earth that he can relate to, he can reason with, and maybe they've spent the last 500,000 years trying to look for people that they could do this with. And every time a Klingon ship flew by, they were like, no, just stay quiet. Stay in your brain terrarium. We're going to wait this one out. And we'll keep working on our robot plans. And when the right people come along, we'll talk to them.
Yeah, they might have even seen Balog, but his robots were crap.
Yeah, right. They're like, come on, it looks like a giant puppet.
All right, it's all wooden and stiff. Do you want to look like that? I don't want to look like that. No. We'll wait.
So, one thing that we learn about Sargon's people is that they went to great lengths to destroy each other. Mm-hmm. You assume a very advanced, very thoughtful, clearly, society, and they went to great lengths to destroy each other. And then they went to the work of preserving what they could. In that one room, there were about a dozen of those containers. Only 3 of them survived. And it's interesting that we do this too. So I don't know if this is kind of like a Cold War parallel here. You remember when it was revealed a few years ago, that bunker that was built under the Greenbrier Hotel in Virginia? We're absolutely sure that we're going to destroy ourselves one way or another. And they built this massive complex where you could evacuate most of our government into, and they had hospital beds, they had TVs, they had rooms, they had food, they had all of this stuff. And we have all kinds of programs like that, from tiny little bunkers to this project of saving seeds. One kind of every seed for every plant that exists on Earth in the event that we destroy ourselves. And on Sargon's planet, they went to the trouble of saving mines perpetually, which I thought was a really interesting idea. Because if we do run into that problem here on Earth, where we face a crisis, well, who gets picked to survive? Who gets to go into that bunker? Mm-hmm. And who doesn't?
That is interesting. You say that Sargon is less eugenicsy than Dr. Corby.
Mm-hmm.
Who chose the mines? And how were they chosen?
There you go.
I mean, we're given to understand that Sargon was kind of a leader here. Now, it's interesting that he chose to save somebody from the other side. I mean, Henoch was fighting on, the opposite side, or disagreed to some level.
Right.
We don't really have a clear idea of what the war was, or what the crisis was, what the inflection point was on their planet. But I mean, it must have been pretty bad, because no atmosphere. Great food.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Great food, but no atmosphere. Thank you very much. 2 Shows Nightly. Be sure and tip your thing. I mean, I kind of... the thing that bothers me about what you're talking about, seeds I'm cool with. But that whole thing about, we're going to save great minds, probably what got you there. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, part of me is like, it would have been cool if it had been like Sargon, the great and powerful, and like a plumber and a barber, or like some
comedian,
guy, a comedian would be fantastic. Yeah, no, that joke was really great. 500,000 years ago, seriously, 500,000 years, you can't work on new material. What is up with glass terrariums? Okay, I don't know. I mean, there's something a tiny bit eugenicsy about it, or at least there may be.
Yeah.
And what we ended up with was still kind of, what you ended up with was sort of like Mama Bear, Papa Bear, and Baby Bear in a way. Or actually my original notes were that Kirk, Mulhall, and Spock are inhabited by Odin, Odin's wife, and Loki. That's kind of what happens.
Nice.
I mean, he's like the guy, Henoch is really just kind of a foil. I mean, he's very much,
totally.
He's evil. I mean, he is the opposite side. Being saved by the, I guess we're going to call them the good guys, really has not affected him in any way. The second he has a chance to go out and be bad again, that's what he's going to do, because that's what he is. Not unlike Loki.
Right. And it's interesting that Sargon didn't see that coming. It was like, hey, Thalassa and I are going to go off and do this human thing for a little bit. We'll get back to you when we see how that goes.
Exactly.
Because you can't be trusted.
Yeah, let's build him a robot body and put him straight into it.
Right.
Yeah.
There's something that, there's an episode that you and I did not like very much, Cat's Paw. Mm-hmm. But there's something similar here in that once you take the aliens and you put them into a physical human form, that's what leads them to temptation. And if there's kind of a humanistic message here, it's about sort of overcoming our own negative traits. These beings are very similar to humans, and Henoch, you compared him to Loki, and he's manipulative and selfish. Sargon is benevolent, and they've been fighting this out in their own way for far longer than we have, and they still haven't found the answer. They haven't been able to figure this out yet. Like I said in the trivia, the writer was trying to make a point about humans possibly being able to survive and thrive, even with these multiple personality traits that we have. But I thought it was interesting that the the human flesh, for them anyway, is what presents that temptation.
See, it's interesting to me that you hear a humanistic message in there, or a humanism message in there, because the only message that I got is we can't. We're not going to win. We're not going to get over it. Even if we get to, big brain, super brain. Still in the end. I mean, the answer for Sargon and Thalassa was, okay, you know what we're going to do? Let's kill ourselves. And maybe you can say, well, they sacrificed themselves. Maybe you can make a whole, even a Christ-like analogy there if you want to. But they're telling themselves the same stories that we tell ourselves. We will be together forever in death, in oblivion. I mean, we're and you promise we're going to be together forever. Yeah. I mean, I've never actually been to oblivion, so I can't say. Here's what I will guarantee, though: we will both be together, not here walking around.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really about the only thing that he can guarantee there. And I mean, the ultimate message seems to be. Yeah, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Almost seems to be the message. I mean, there's going to be a point where you've just kind of been here too long, and it may be time to say sayonara.
Well, it's a little bit of a contrived, tragic ending. That is one of the things that Dugan did not like about the change to his original script, and I could kind of see that. Like, can't they go hang out with Trelane's mom and dad or Apollo's people? Apparently, there's all these energy beings just out there in the universe. Place is lousy with them. Can't fly a spaceship without hitting one eventually.
Right.
But and maybe this is just sort of relying too much on that original story draft. That he was trying to make this point about humans having a better shot. But I see what you mean. At least in this story with these characters, with Sargon and Thalassa, they take that path of saying, well, we have to do this. And I'm thinking, well, hey, you still have a robot body. You could still go to the lab. You don't have to do this.
Yeah. They take the Thalosian route, honestly. Remember the Thalosians were like, oh, no, you can't. We can't even work a trade deal with you because you'll learn how to do this and you'll just screw it up the way we've just screwed it up. So you go ahead. We'll die. We'll die eventually. I mean, that's the difference. I mean, Sargon and Thalassa are dead by the end of this episode, whereas the Talosians, who knows how long it's going to take them.
And if you're Scotty, before they leave, you're just like, hey, before you go, remember that warp engine on a walnut?
Yeah, there was talk. There was talk of just a little. Could you show me a tiny? No.
Were the centuries in waiting all for naught, or are there still lessons to be learned from Sargon, Thalassa, and Henoch?
Why does this moment fall to me? Time now to suss out the messages, morals, and meanings of this episode and figure out whether it stands the test of time. Why does this moment fall to me, John? It seems like I'm always the guy who's asking these questions.
You just, I don't know. You shy away from this moment, but I love this moment.
Oh, I don't shy away from this moment. I'm there. I'm just wondering why I'm the one who always says, so. But having said that, what do you think?
So if I were to put this in a nutshell, like maybe a walnut shell, and try to figure out if this episode holds up, I would say that part of the fun here is watching the crew that we know act out of character. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like the fun of watching a TV show. We know that these are actors. We know the characters that they play, but now we get to watch them do something else. And you may even get a giggle out of Shatner's interesting physical contortions whenever he is either in pain or being inhabited by Sargon. That's certainly entertaining.
It is almost always interesting to see Spock smile. It is almost never good.
Yeah,
I mean, usually when it happens,
something
bad has happened. The one time that he smiled where you're like, oh, that's okay, is when he realized at the end of a mock time that Kirk wasn't dead. That's okay. Otherwise, it's like, either he's been huffing spores or he's been taken over by another consciousness or who knows what's going on. But if Spock's smiling, batten down the hatches because probably something's not good. Yeah. But it is neat to see. I mean, it's great because you get season after season and then movie after movie of a very stoic Leonard Nimoy playing Spock, and so just to see Nimoy walking around going. It's like, wow, that is so, he can do that. That's neat.
Yeah. So it's a lot of fun without being jokey. Mm-hmm. They're not writing jokes in there, but there is this sort of element of sly humor that we're making these characters be different. So I really like that just as a piece of storytelling. And then the other thing that works here is this is just one of those pieces of kind of pure science fiction that's so good when Star Trek does it and does it well, because you get the character element and you get the fascinating points to ponder about humanity's future and what do we do when our knowledge and our technology sort of runs at a faster pace than our ability to be moral and civil and ethical to each other. These are all just really great ideas, and I touched on it just a little bit to say that this could have been something kind of influenced at least by the Cold War, to say, okay, there is this reality we live with that we could destroy each other. So what do we do, either A, to stop that, or B, how do we conceive of a world when we've done that? What part of us survives? This is all really great kind of heady stuff. So to me, I really, really like this episode quite a lot. Does it hold up? Absolutely, it holds up. I think it's a great watch, and I was so glad when we got around to this in the schedule, because this is one of those that I've seen a lot, and I knew that I wanted to watch it again and again.
Yeah. I will say that I don't know what the messages are, honestly, and the messages that I sort of start to pull out, I don't know that I agree with, but I love it. I found it to be an enjoyable episode. I mean, there's enough here to chew on. There's enough here to consider that this episode is well worth the investment in time. And to double back really quickly on some of the stuff that you were saying about the acting, we talked a couple of weeks ago, or I guess, which was the one where they were all Logie? I guess it was a couple of weeks ago.
The immunity
syndrome, right. There was nothing believable about Shatner's acting in that episode. There was very little believable about the writing. There was nothing believable about his acting. When he becomes Sargon in this episode, there is just, barring the first time, Sargon has not literally walked in a physical body in 500,000 years. So the first time he's in Kirk's body, he's sort of like the Tin Man right after they oil him in The Wizard of Oz. But after that, the rest of the times that Sargon inhabits Kirk's body, it's just, this is where Shatner actually is an actor. It's subtle. Yeah. There's just a change in his body language. There's just a little bit of a change in his posture. Now, of course, it's not hurt by the fact that they, over process his voice to let us know, okay, he's inhabited by this guy right now. But even if they hadn't had him change the voice, there was still enough of a visual cue from Shatner that wasn't crazy, that wasn't over the top, that wasn't, sawing the air with his hand thus. It was just subtle, that you knew that there was somebody else there. And that, it's little things like that that actually make this episode, that sell this episode, I think. Yeah.
And everybody gets to do that. Spock gets to do that. Dinah Muldaur as Mulhall / Thalassa gets to do that. And it's a lot of fun to watch them. And on top of all of that, I would say that there's a great love story here. I think the Sargon Thalassa, their relationship is believable, and it's part of what this episode hinges on. And I really love that when Kirk / Mulhall find themselves in these embraces, that they get to enjoy it a bit. And it's not that kind of salacious, leering, I'm checking out the yeoman kind of thing. This is much more mature, and it's really great.
So now I said I don't know what the messages are, and if there are messages, I don't know that I agree. Did you feel like you pulled a particular message? Is there one that you could look at, point to it, and go, okay, here's what we're saying?
Oh, right. Well, see, that's the problem. I wrote down these notes thinking like, well, these are the little things that I pick up on. You can't live on mind power alone, and yet flesh is a powerful temptation. But hey, it's just better to cast yourself into oblivion than to be trapped in a robot. That was for you, Ken.
That's a crappy message. I think that's a crappy message.
I know. Because, we say that and we end up with that in the episode. But at the same time, you kind of sit there in, if not awe, at least with a deep kind of respect for Sargon and what his people have done. To be able to carry on, to be able to keep their consciousness alive, So it's hard to really pin that down to a message. I was being more jokey and writing those down. So I don't know that there's a message. I think this kind of exists in this space where you get to look at it and you go, oh, okay, well, here's another society that grew too fast, that destroyed itself in the process, and maybe they're trying to learn something from it. It's valuable stuff, but I don't know if that's what this episode is truly about. I don't think it is. But what we do get to experience here is all the cool character stuff, all the neat ideas of this episode without there being a heavy-handed message. But I'll remind everybody, go back and check out that discovered document, because you'll see what the writer wrote out as his intention for the messages and the points to ponder in this story.
So pretty cool. We got what you think. We got what I think. We have access to what the writer thought. So I guess the only thing left is, what do people listening think? Tell them how they can tell us, John.
All right. Well, I would love it if they told us via Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. All three of those places can be reached at Mission Log Pod. You can even call us at 323-522-5641. And you can email us, missionlog@roddenberry.com. Don't forget, we have a homepage on the internet called missionlogpodcast.com. That's where you'll find not only back issue episodes of Mission Log Podcast, but you will find the discovered documents. And remember, if you leave us a comment, we may be tempted to use it in an upcoming episode of Mission Log.
Next week, we'll use the Force, John. Oh, maybe not. We will, however, examine patterns of Force.
Some of the music for the Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. Next week, no robots. I may not even bother showing up. End transmission.
Now leaving Nerdist.com.